Hi, this is Diane Stepro coming to you from Jeffersonville Township Public Library in Jeffersonville, Indiana, just across the river from Louisville, Kentucky. I hope that you caught my other video, A Brief History of Poetry in Indiana. This is a follow-up with just some readings of Indiana poetry from the distant past and some maybe a little less distant, depends on your perspective. But I'd like to start with one that I think might be familiar to some of you, but I thought it was seasonally appropriate. It's from James Whitcomb Riley, When the Green Gets Back on the Trees. When the green gets back in the trees and bees is a buzzin' around again, and that kind of lazy go-as-you-please old gait they bum round in. When the ground's all bald where the hay rick stood and the cricks rise and the breeze coaxes the bloom in the old dogwood, and the green gets back in the trees. I like, as I say, in such scenes as these, the time when the green gets back in the trees. When the whole tail feathers of winter time is all pulled out and gone, and the sap it thaws and begins to climb, and the sweat it starts out on a feller's forehead and getting down at the old spring on his knees. I kind of like just loafing around when the green gets back up the trees, just a pottering round as I durn please when the green, gets back in the trees. That is all of that one. Here's one called Spring Cleaning from Margaret Bruner. Don't know much about Margaret, but here's her poem. I thought it was appropriate as well. Spring Cleaning. They cleared the lower field where once the apple orchard stood. It was too old to bear, and so they chopped it up for wood. I wonder if the old tree winced beneath the saw and axe, but one must look ahead and plan. There's spring and autumn tax. Soon in its stead the eye will greet a field of fresh turned loam, where myriad blooms once drifted down like fragrant bits of foam. But when the rank corn towers to meet the sun and rain's caress, I shall remember aged trees and their lost loveliness. And that's from Indiana Poets, published in 1935 by Henry Harrison Publishers in New York, and the foreword was by Merrill Root. Here's another one I thought was very pretty by Mary Larkin Cook called Summer Night. The shadows come creeping when eventide steals, as daylight is fading over forest and fields. The birds cease their singing and silently creep to sheltered safe places to rest and sleep. Then crickets are chirping and fireflies appear and dance through the valley, so still and clear. With tiny bright lanterns, they flash and they glow to lighten the shadows wherever they go. And all through the stillness, a night bird is calling, a blaze in the heavens, a meteor is falling. The soft wind is whispering through leafy green trees as moonbeams are dancing about in the breeze. The katydids argue, in tones loud and clear, that autumn is coming with nothing to fear. As tinkling of cowbells far over the hills blends with the musical song of the rills, then join in the melody nature is wrought. Away in the wildwood, with beauty so fraught, your cares and your worries will vanish away, if you'll hold nature's hand at close of the day. Now, I'm not a big fan of rhyming poetry, actually, but that one did a good job of painting a picture of the summer evening in our minds, and I really like that one. Here's the one that does a similar job of painting a picture by an Elaine DeBolt, another poet in the Indiana Poets Anthology. This one is called Rare Beauty. I've known some lovely things upon this world of ours that rise within my dreams and haunt me still for hours. A bowl of digitalis remains as vivid yet, as long uh, resplendent bars from a sun that never set. One time I saw a moon that actually was blue. But this one thing I feel will always prove quite true. The rarest beauty that I've witnessed any place has been a smile upon a dreaming lover's face. Here's one by Max Ehrmann called Indiana. The pioneers lie in their earthen beds. Still lives their dauntless faith to do and dare, in cities that lift high their lofty heads, in busy towns that prosper everywhere. What sturdy men have plowed these fertile fields here in this land where pleasant rivers run, where wayside flowers, forests, harvest yields are nursed by never failing rain and sun? A toiling, peaceful life this people leads, not moved by red rebellion's scarlet leer, nor whirlwinds shouting out sophomoric creeds. The turmoils of the world's touch lightly here. If in some future time our country fall on rocks of evil days, this middle land will lift her up, her sanity recall, and bind her wounds as with a mother's hand. For here we know no sections east or west or north or south. Here are people bound by many sacred ties to all the rest. Here is the heartbeat of the nation's sound. Dear Indiana, always, as of old, keep thou unsullied as the sea. Despising tyrants, whether mobs or gold, compassion, mother of a people free. Excuse me, compassionate mother of a people free. Well, Ehrman was a bit sentimental. I don't know much about him, but reading his poetry, yeah, he was a bit sentimental. Some of you might like that. He also wrote the poem Terre Haute, and if you've ever been to Terre Haute, I don't think you would ever write the opening line of this poem. What place is lovelier than Terre Haute? I'm just going to leave that there. Another poem from the same anthology by Aaron Miller is called Man Lives Alone. And I think it paints a very nice picture. A graybeard man sat silently beneath an apple tree. A stranger chanced the man to see, and pausing there said he, Why sit there in that willow chair, O lonesome graybeard man? Come take a walk up over there by muddy Otterban. The graybeard raised his head aloft, and in a peaceful tone he spoke with accents low and soft. Quoth he, Man lives alone. The stranger passed along the road and in a whispered tone removed from his own soul a load. Quoth he, Man lives alone. Lincoln is a person who comes up in Indiana and other Midwestern poetry time and time again because, of course, he lived here. And I think we all want to feel that we have something in common with him. And here's one from the same poetry anthology by Edith Lombard Squires called Lincoln at Gettysburg. Once more the cheers for Everett filled the air, and Lincoln waited till the crowd grew still. A tall, gaunt, awkward man he stood, head bare, before the silent throng to speak his will. He spoke to them deep from his inmost heart, with simple eloquence and homely phrase. Here was no orator's convincing art, but only truth that lanterned all his ways. And shall not perish from this earth, rang out echoed, re-echoed past the silent throng. He thought defeat lay in no answering shout, but victory winged her shining ways with song, re-echoing that silence through the years, silence too deep for words, too still for fears. I actually take issue with that. I think the problem was not that Lincoln was a poor orator. I think he was a great orator. I think that people just had weird expectations at that time. And I think I'll start wrapping it up. Here's one from Lila Terry from that same anthology called Dream Magic. I fell asleep one winter night and dreamed its brief span through that it was dusk in April and I woke in love with you. The thin, complaining winter winds have learned a magical, warm sunrise, marigold and rose, embower the garden wall. The magic door of sleep is swung on vistas all unknown. The barrier that closed out spring was in my heart alone. And last, I would like to read one recent poem by the contemporary poet Jared Carter. His poems were the first contemporary poems that were ever put in my hands. I'd really never seen anything that you couldn't analyze as far as the rhyme scheme and the meter. And sometimes he does write with rhyme and meter, but he also writes a lot of free verse. And he writes a lot about themes that really are meaningful to people from Indiana. And I grew up hearing stories about my great-grandfather's peony farm and how when she was a little girl, my mother would walk down the rows and shake each peony before their harvest, which was around the middle of May back then when the weather was cooler. And the reason she had to shake them was to get the ants off because they would eat the buds and they weren't very nice to have in a bouquet. And they would sell them. They put them in cold storage as they picked them, and they would, when they had a lot, they would sell them. And the bulk were sold for Memorial Day and were put on graves. Before we had a lot of silk flowers, it was common to keep one's family members' graves decorated with real bouquets. I think it's a beautiful thing. So this one is called Shaking the Peonies for Effie, and it's from Jared Carter's Work for the Night is Coming, his book that won the Walt Whitman Award. And he is a very Indiana poet. I would lie down again in your bed of fabrications like a quilt of many voices covering me in darkness, colors stitched from the motion of your hands bringing water from low places, or your kneeling each morning to build a fire as though the sun had come to call and we were all new. I would sit peeling apples with you in the plum tree shade, waiting for the 4 o'clocks to open. When the dog found his corner at bedtime, I would again watch his turning, hear your voice, and see immemorial grasses bending. When you asked, the long legs pointed the way of the wind. When you pulled the shell to my ear, I heard the sea. I would go again with you, carrying cans of bright flowers, heavy iron shears, sun hats made of straws, and gloves, peonies falling over drowsy to the ground by that day, and gathered in bunches, ivory and white, like girls gowned in green leaves. I would imitate your swinging as you show me how to shake off the ants, and they fall. Go following after you on that day of light and stones, lodged in a green meadow, to place the blades of grass again in order. To place the blades of grass again in order, to trace the hard insignia of hearts, smooth links of change and tools, to be again there with you, encountering old friends who also come to decorate each year, who speak of times when you were young together, listening to voices, admiring the flame of blossoms, the bees, the white lamb that waits on the stone, would hear pollen in those shadows all the naming, gathering of things, parts innumerable to make up this world, and I would lie down again, yes, and become whole like the end of a story and sleep. So, I don't know who Effie is, but I would guess someone, maybe a grandparent, that the poet or the speaker of the poem has loved. And of course, part of it is memory and part of it is carrying the flowers to the grave. It's probably a good way to end. Thank you for being with us, and I hope you have a very, very safe month.